Yo guys, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to discuss Nintendo's possible game lineup for 2020. So today is October 25th, 2019, which means we are less than a week away from November 2019, which then means we're less than 2 months away from the end of the year. 2020 is right around the corner, which feels so insane. I've mentioned this before, how the year 2020 feels like such a far future date that it's hard for me to imagine that it's something that we're all going to be living in literally just a matter of months. Now, as far as gaming goes, the gaming industry is kind of getting ready to release some of its last few big titles for the year of 2019. I think of titles like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Death Stranding, and of course the Pokemon games for the Nintendo Switch. Luigi's Mansion, of course, is just 1 week from today. And those are probably the 4 last really high-profile big games I can think of. I mean, we had a couple of delays, of course. Doom Eternal got shifted into next year, unfortunately. And when we look at the Nintendo Switch, we realize that, yeah, other than Luigi's Mansion and the Pokemon games, there isn't a lot more that we can expect to be super excited about. Granted, there's been some slam banger great games released for the Nintendo Switch this year. It's crazy. I've even got a couple of them sitting right here on my desk next to me. So make no mistake, the Switch has had a really strong 2019, like its third year on the market technically. And coming off of an insanely strong launch year in 2017, one of the best years the company's ever had. And then, in my opinion, a much slower 2018, it was nice to see Nintendo and the Switch rebound a bit this year. But then we set our sights on 2020. What's just, 5, 6, I guess 8 or 9 weeks away, 2020. What can we expect for the Switch next year? A lot of it's a mystery, some of it isn't a mystery, and that's kind of what I wanted to discuss. Will 2020 be another incredible year for Nintendo as far as games lineup for the Nintendo Switch, both first and third party? I'm starting to think that, yeah, I think that 2020 could be another amazing year for the Nintendo, another feather in its cap. And if that turns out to be true, we would have 4 calendar years under the Switch's belt: 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. And if 2020 plays out this way and turns out to be really strong, then that means 3 out of those 4 years will have been amazing years with not much slowdown to it. And I think that could end up being really impressive, man. When we end up looking back on the Switch's life as a whole, whenever we finally move on from it, it'll be really interesting to see how strong Nintendo treated the Switch, especially coming off the unfortunate failure that was the 4 or so years of the Wii U's life. So it's all very interesting. So I want to get into some of the games, some of what we know we can expect, and then kind of theorize a little bit on some stuff, because even the couple of games that we already know about are remarkably impressive and set us up for a great year. The first game we'll talk about is probably the biggest confirmed game that we know of right now for the Switch in 2020, and that, of course, is Animal Crossing New Horizons. Now, as I mentioned to you guys, every time Animal Crossing comes up, it is not a series for me, even though I am a huge Nintendo fan and I worship almost every one of their first-party franchises. Animal Crossing is one of the few that has never spoken to me. I've dabbled in the GameCube release when it came out because everyone was very high on it, and it didn't really work for me, and I've never been into it since. It is just not a series that appeals to me. But of course, as I also like to remind you guys, it is a game my girlfriend is very excited for. So that game will make it into our house, and I will be watching her play it and get a little bit of an idea of what that game is like. All of that being said, my personal opinion on Animal Crossing aside, there is one thing that is a concrete fact, and that is that Animal Crossing on the Switch will be a humongous hit. It is going to be one of the most massive sellers on the console. I'm sure it's going to sell more than 5 million copies, which is pretty darn big. It might make it to 10 million. I don't really know, but I'm going to sit with just a random number, 5 million right now. It's a big deal, you guys. It's a big game. And initially, when it was revealed to us, it was supposed to come out in 2019. And by the time Nintendo was finally ready to give us a date a couple of months ago, I think during E3, that was when they told us it's actually going to be 2020. And so through that, we now know that March 20th, 2020 is the release date for Animal Crossing. And beyond this game being a big seller on its own, I think what's important to remember is that this game could very likely also be a system seller, one of those key pieces of software that also moves hardware for the respective company or the respective platform that it's on. I think of games like Super Smash Brothers and Mario games and Zelda games and Pokemon games as franchises that move units and sell hardware. I think Animal Crossing is pretty much almost on that tier, and again, I say that as a non-fan of the franchise. I just understand how strong the fanship is and how passionate people are about Animal Crossing, and I think it's great. I do see the appeal, even though it's not a series that appeals to me personally. And so this game, of the few games we know are 2020 right now, I think will be the biggest game that we know of, unless they give a massive bomb drop of something, which certainly could still happen, and I'll get to that. I think Animal Crossing is going to be one of the biggest, and it's going to sell Nintendo Switches, and it's going to be great. Bayonetta 3 is a game that I want to talk about with you guys really quickly, and it's a tricky one because Bayonetta 3 does not have a release date, it doesn't have a release window, it doesn't have a release year. However, considering the fact that this game was announced like almost 2 years ago, and we now know it's not coming out in 2019, I cannot possibly envision a world where Bayonetta 3 is set for 2021. And so I feel like 2020 is a pretty safe bet for the game. But of course, the asterisk is added here. It doesn't have the date of 2020. Anything is possible. But I'm going to talk about it going on the assumption that this game will probably be a 2020 game. In which case, I'm over the moon for it, you guys. I cannot freaking wait. I think Bayonetta 2 was probably my favorite game on the Wii U. Not counting Breath of the Wild. If I look at Breath of the Wild as a Switch game, because I didn't play it on the Wii U, I think Bayonetta 2 was my favorite Wii U game, and one of my very favorite games of the generation. Maybe my favorite game? I don't know. I'd have to go through everything. It was a great generation, honestly, last time, but Bayonetta is a great series, and what a crazy turn of events that franchise has gone through, becoming exclusive to Nintendo through them saving Bayonetta 2 from Sega, who decided to not publish it. It's a really crazy story. It's an amazing franchise, some of the best action gameplay, a great main character, a crazy kooky world, so much content. It's just incredible, you guys. I mean, everyone's really high on Devil May Cry 5 and Astral Chain, and those are two great games that I very much bought and owned and played this year, but I don't think either of them hold a candle to Bayonetta. And so Bayonetta 3 is going to be a huge win for the Nintendo Switch, and if it really is a 2020 game, I think it's going to be one of the flagship titles for that year. Obviously, I have to talk about my most anticipated game for 2020 across the entire industry, with the exception of The Last of Us Part 2. But my next most anticipated game for the year is No More Heroes 3. That's right, Travis freaking Touchdown is coming back, and if you guys saw my E3 Nintendo Direct reactions, you know how excited I am for it. And I've talked about No More Heroes a few times. It's one of my top 5 favorite gaming franchises of all time. I loved the first 2 games. Travis Strikes Again, which came out in January, was fine. It was okay. It was certainly fun to have a No More Heroes experience released again. It wasn't the greatest game, but it was fun. It got the job done. I would give it probably a 7 out of 10, 7.5. I think I gave it a 7.5 or a 7.7 in my review. It's a really fun little spin-off game. It's a fun little distraction. But now we've had No More Heroes 3 confirmed by Nintendo, by Suda51. This is crazy. This is the dream that 5 years ago I never would have thought could be possible. It's a tricky release, though, because No More Heroes has a huge cult following and will be successful in its own right, I'm sure. But it's also not a huge franchise, right? It doesn't appeal to a lot of people. I'm sure most people don't even know what the hell it is. So it's not going to be one of those Switch games in 2020 that's a huge seller, that makes a huge splash and is all in the news and is getting the crazy reviews and is selling Nintendo Switches to people. It's not that kind of release. But I don't really mind that. I don't need it to be that. I just want it to be A, good, which I believe it will, and B, to be enough of a hit to let Nintendo and Suda51 and Grasshopper and everyone understand that this franchise still has life and this character has life, and that we are happy that the third game came out and that the fans reward the people behind this game with strong sales so that they see No More Heroes has life, because man, I'm so excited. And so, as far as I can tell, that's really the 3 main big 2020 games that we have to talk about for the Switch right now, 2 months before the end of 2019. You know, the only other game that kind of popped up that I wanted to briefly mention is Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which was a Wii U game, is getting a Switch port. It's the next in line of Wii U ports to the Switch. That's coming out in January, so we're going to get that early on in the year. I know that that's going to be really successful and popular for fans of that kind of game and that kind of stuff, and I have wanted to play it, but I think I would rather play the Wii U version, to be honest, because I like the gamepad, and I know that game has heavy gamepad usage. But this game isn't gonna be huge on the Switch the same way like Mario Kart 8 was, or New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was. Those games are huge sellers. Tokyo Mirage Sessions I don't think will be massive. Although, I could see a world where it maybe hits 1 million units, which would certainly be a big hit and very successful. So hopefully it gets that. I want it to be successful. It's just not my kind of game. On top of that, of course, we now know that we're getting a lot more Smash Brothers DLC throughout 2020. Initially, it was going to end in like early 2020, but they recently announced that there's a whole new set of 5 new characters that they're going to be releasing after the first 5 are done. So 2020 is going to be full of new Smash Brothers Ultimate content throughout that entire year as well, and that's really great. And so that's the confirmed stuff we have. Animal Crossing, No More Heroes, Bayonetta not confirmed but expected, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and a ton of Smash Brothers DLC. Now, it's worth noting that there are 2 pretty high-profile third-party games that we can expect on the Nintendo Switch next year as well. And that, of course, is Doom Eternal and The Outer Worlds. Those are pretty big deal games, and I think it's important to remember that part of the Switch's lineup every year, any console's lineup any year, are the third-party games and the multi-platform games, and these are 2 huge wins. We've seen a lot of strong third-party ports to the Nintendo Switch, of course, with Resident Evil games and Skyrim and Doom and Wolfenstein and Dark Souls and just all this great stuff. And Mortal Kombat 11, of course, is a huge one. And now we're seeing 2 more great ones coming to the Switch. Doom Eternal is going to be a huge win because the first Doom, which already was a year late by the time it made it to the Switch, made a huge splash. Doom Eternal, I think we all expect to be an even better game than the last Doom. And knowing it's coming to the Switch is going to be great. Right now, they did confirm that it's not releasing the same day and date as the other consoles in March, and that is really unfortunate, but hey, I predicted that back at E3, man. I was already seeing the writings on the wall, and sure enough, that's what's happening. And The Outer Worlds, funnily enough, came out today for all the other consoles, and I'm going to be playing it as soon as I'm done with this video. But the Switch version does not yet have a date. So, barring a random last-minute 2019 drop in like December, that game is going to be a 2020 release for the Switch. And it's worth noting that these are 2 huge third-party games. This trend is continuing, and I expect even more games like this to be released as multi-platform and include the Nintendo Switch in 2020. Now, what about games that we could theorize about? Games that we could predict? Games that Nintendo has not talked about or confirmed? There's a couple that I think are worth bringing up as potential 2020 releases. The first and obvious and biggest one is Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Oh, Breath of the Wild 2. What to do with you? What do we expect to happen with this game? It is so hard to say. I feel like if I had to just give my own base prediction, if I was going to predict a release year for that game right here and now, based on nothing other than my gut feeling, it's probably 2021. I see that game as being a fall or holiday 2021 release, which puts it about 2 years away from now. And I know that hurts, but that just feels the most right to me. And even if it's not holiday 2021, maybe it somehow makes it out earlier in the year, which would also be completely fine. However, could this game be a 2020 release? And the answer is yes, it could be a 2020 release. In fact, as I discussed on my last video, there's a good chance that if this game is ready to release in 2020 somehow, that Nintendo actually plans to release it to sort of combat the releases of the Xbox Scarlet and the PlayStation 5, which are right now set for holiday next year. And so maybe something Nintendo plans to do to keep themselves relevant and a part of the conversation and remind people, hey, we're still here, our Switch is still here, and it's great, and we've still got great games. In fact, here is one of the biggest games of the whole generation, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. That would be a huge release, and so that's a situation where I could see Nintendo has that game ready to go for 2020. I'm not yet ready to put my money on next year for what it's worth. I still feel like 2021 or later makes a lot more sense, but anything is possible, and I certainly want it sooner than later, so I think it's worth including in the conversation here. I have to say that I do also think that Pikmin has a good chance at showing up next year as well. I recently said Pikmin has to be on the horizon. I feel like it's coming soon. We have been running through most of Nintendo's main first-party franchises in the Switch era. We've gone through a Mario, a Zelda, a Xenoblade, a Splatoon, kind of a Mario Kart, a Super Smash Brothers, a Fire Emblem, a Luigi's Mansion, an Animal Crossing. I mean, the list just goes on and on. We've gone through so much stuff. And so Pikmin is one of the last few remaining ones, and we know that they've been working on a Pikmin 4 for a long time. It's just never showed up. So 2020 it has to be the year. I feel like there's almost no way that Pikmin 4 won't be releasing on the Switch in 2020, and so I want to put my money on that. Also, I just brought up Mario Kart, and I think it's worth bringing up the idea or the concept of Mario Kart 9. What about a new Mario Kart? I mean, Mario Kart 8 is like the game that doesn't die. It's amazing what Nintendo accomplished with that game, both on the Wii U and then on the Nintendo Switch. The same game on both consoles, and it sold so well, it's insane. And that's why we also know a new Mario Kart has to be in the works. I have a theory where Mario Kart 9 could be something that they want to save to launch the next Nintendo console, but also we're kind of at the point where we need a new Mario Kart. It's been a while. 2014 is when it released on the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Wii U. And so it's just time. And so I don't really know how likely I put this game at being a release for 2020, but I think it's at least worth bringing it up. And then you get to other weird, more obscure series like Kid Icarus and F-Zero, and sure, those are always on the docket, but I don't really know how much we should believe in any one of those franchises just yet. They're so strange and obscure, they're hard to predict, but I wanted to at least mention them. And then, of course, we come to the last big one, and it's Metroid. Are we going to see some kind of Metroid in 2020? And I really want to say yes, you guys. I feel in my heart of hearts that there is a really damned good chance that Metroid is supposed to make it to the Switch in some fashion next year, I think. Obviously, people jump to the Metroid Prime Trilogy idea, and yeah, it's still possible, but I've told you, I'm done being burned by the Metroid Prime Trilogy, so it's not what I'm going to put my money on. I'm not believing in the Metroid Prime Trilogy. Nintendo has lost my faith in that game for now. If it happens, great. I'm going to freak out, we're all going to be happy, and I'll be discussing it once it happens for sure, mark my words. But right now, it's not what I expect. What I do expect is a different kind of new Metroid game. And that could be, as I've said many times, a port of something like a Metroid Samus Returns. It could be a port of maybe just the first Metroid Prime game. It could be a brand new game. That's something that I want to see, is a brand new Metroid game, you know? Maybe they do like another M thing, sure, they might do something like that, but I feel like a new Metroid game does make sense. I could see Nintendo releasing some sort of incredible brand new 2D Metroid game. I think that they were planning on staggering stuff like, you know, 2D Samus Returns, 3D Metroid Prime 4, and then another 2D game, and then another 3D game. Maybe they were going to do that, but of course the delay of Metroid Prime 4 changed that. Because if Metroid Prime 4 was supposed to release in 2019, maybe they then had a 2020 2D Metroid game ready to go, to kind of build off of the hype and the success they saw with Samus Returns. And so I really want to believe that a 2D Metroid has a damned good shot at showing up in 2020, you guys. I really think it might happen. Now, would a new 2D Metroid game on the Switch actually be like a remake of a different game, like, you know, a Super Metroid remake or a Metroid Fusion remake, something like that? Or would it be just its own brand new kind of title that's like a Metroid 5? I talk about it, maybe a Metroid 5, or maybe just a brand new thing that's its own thing. Who even knows? Like, I think the sky's the limit, but I really want to believe that Nintendo is doing something with Metroid in 2020. I firmly believe it. It's obviously not Metroid Prime 4, so anyone who thinks that game is going to suddenly be ready in 2020, please just don't get your hopes up. It's not going to happen. The Prime Trilogy, yeah, it's floating out there as an idea that could totally show up, and let's just wait to see. But I kind of think that a new Metroid game, a new 2D Metroid game using whatever crazy graphical style Nintendo wants to put into it, could really be something special, you guys. And it doesn't feel crazy to think that Nintendo's doing it and to expect it, so I kind of expect it. I really do. And so I'll probably revisit that topic on another video sometime in the next couple of weeks. But for now, as far as looking at the overall 2020 picture, I think it makes sense to talk about Metroid and to consider it. So yeah, that's kind of what I feel about that. And so, whew, we talked about a lot of games. That was a lot to discuss, man. 2020 for Nintendo and the Switch could be crazy. It could be amazing. It could be life-changing. Who even knows? We got a couple of really great games to expect. Nintendo has done such a great job in the Switch era. We have no reason to think that that's going to slow down. I'm sure they're going to continue the massive success, the great sales success, the great PR, and of course the great games into 2020 and beyond. I really do. You know, and then I didn't talk about a Switch Pro. Could a Switch Pro happen? Could it not? Maybe. That's, you know, I've talked about that enough. We'll wait till more rumors show up before I talk about it again. Because if there was a Switch Pro, it could very much change the game as far as the game library for 2020. So it's an important piece to the puzzle if the damned thing was real, but we're still waiting to see what's happening with that. So either way, for now, that's kind of, I think, the summary of everything. That's the 2020 picture right now as I see it. What do you guys think about my opinions, my thoughts, my theories, my predictions, my discussions on games like Animal Crossing and Bayonetta and No More Heroes? All that crazy stuff. It's going to be a really nutty year, man. It's going to be very exciting. So with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.